Hello, and welcome to my presentation. In a nutshell, mastery learning is a lot like building with Legos. When we build with Legos, we use different sized blocks to make something much larger. Like my school! However, unlike building with Legos, we usually start with the smallest pieces first when teaching for mastery. Each piece has a purpose and a place. And as we keep adding piece to piece, we eventually end up with larger pieces. We then build onto those pieces with smaller pieces, and so on, one piece at a time, until we are finally able to get to where we want to be. Sounds simple, right? Well, there's actually a lot that goes into doing it right.
Now that you know more about this model, I'm going to show you how I've been using it in my classes. My process is fairly straightforward. Take a concept you want to teach and analyze it for smaller concepts that might be needed to complete it. Break the individual parts into easily mastered parts. Give formative assessments to allow students to track their progress and provide feedback. Give a final summative assessment. In this example, I will use a piece that is standard for double-based literature. I'll just zoom in here a little so we can see it better. The first things I notice as I begin to break it apart are the most obvious. The title, which tells me that this is arranged for solo double bass and is by Bach. The composer is specifically J.S. Bach and not one of the other 6 Bachs who were composers. I could also use this information to teach a mini lesson on who J.S. Bach was and why they should know about him. The subtitle on this piece tells me it's from the second suite and is the first movement and is a prelude. All of this would be used to give a background lesson, which would include audio examples of the work and a history of the cello suites, which this piece is arranged from. I should also note that even though the notes are written fast, the tempo should be slow and movements flowing. I know this from the word prelude. The key signature over here tells me we're in G minor instead of the original D minor. This is important to know because when students listen to examples, they should be listening for the feel and interpretation, and not playing along unless they find an example in G minor. Next, I'll dive into the music. In this passage, I see a number of important skills that any bassist should practice before tackling this work. 1. The range of the notes tells me that I should be in the second octave. 2. I should be able to play the G minor arpeggios fluidly. 3. I should be able to slur 4 notes. 4. Bowing is also given, but because I learned my history about Bach, I also know that he didn't write in bowings. So I have some room to adjust them to be musically and physically better for the musician. 5. This would also be an example of my first formative quiz. In this section, I see that there are accidentals added. Students should understand how to read them, and they should definitely note the note A flat at the end, as this is not a common note and could be easily missed. After mastering the first phrase, we would then let them to go ahead and work on the rest of the piece. This first section of music would be my next formative assessment. I would then repeat the process for the next section, and so forth and so on until the end. Here is my very basic outline of how my unit or lesson would flow. This process, or others like it, could be easily used in any subject area. The following video will show how the Khan Academy has been able to teach mastery to math students.
This is actually data from a pilot in the Los Altos School District where they took 2 5th grade classes and 2 7th grade classes and completely gutted their old math curriculum. These kids aren't using textbooks, they're not getting one-size-fits-all lectures, they're doing Khan Academy, they're doing that software for roughly half of their math class. And I want to make it clear, we don't view this as the complete math education. What it does is, and this is what's happening in Los Altos, it frees up time. This is the blocking and tackling, making sure you know how to do a system of equations, and it frees up time for the simulations, for the games, for the mechanics, for the robot building, for the estimating how high that hill is based on its shadow. And so the paradigm is the teacher walks in every day, every kid works at their own pace, and a teacher this is actually a live dashboard from Los Altos School District, and they look at this dashboard. Every row is a student, every column is one of those concepts. Green means the student's already proficient. Blue means that they're working on it, no need to worry. Red means they're stuck. And what the teacher does is literally just says, let me intervene on the red kids. Or even better, let me get one of the green kids who are already proficient in that concept to be the first line of attack and actually tutor their peer.
So now that you've gotten an overview of the model and been shown an example of how to do it, what do you think?
When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Whoa there, Vader. There's still more to consider before you start adding something new to your classroom. The first difficulty is that it requires a lot of planning. Planning for mastery is difficult and requires a lot of parts to be carefully thought out before implementation. Creation of class materials will take time to gather, and assessments are given frequently, so grading time takes a lot more time than usual unless it's assisted by technology. Time is a very big issue. According to our textbooks, we find that Carroll interpreted aptitude to be the amount of time it takes someone to learn something. This can be varied a lot from student to student and may cause considerable issues. Also, the way students proceed from grade to grade is an issue because it doesn't take into consideration mastery of skills. According to one article, progression to the next level is more of a function of sitting in a seat for a fixed period of time than demonstrating mastery of the content. Another difficulty is that it's solely a direct instructional model. In this model, the teacher is still directing everything. While students may self-pace, it is up to the teacher to be the primary source of instruction. And lastly, is an observation of my own, students can become bored with the subject and frustrated when they are not keeping up with their peers. Because of the individual nature of the learning, students may get bored because they're not getting much of social interaction, maybe they're not liking the material very much, or maybe their learning styles are not being engaged. Even worse than that is if students start talking to each other and notice that other classmates are ahead of them, they may feel pressured to try and keep up even though they're not at that point yet, which may lead to frustration, failure, and even possible low self-esteem and feeling like they're stupid. You want to avoid that for sure. If it's so difficult, why should I continue to think about this model? Well, with technology allowing us to help, it's becoming a lot easier to do this, and we can diversify within the classroom. And I'll also send it to Khan. No, not that Khan. Sal Khan, the one we heard from before, in his TED Talk, and let him go ahead and wrap up some of the benefits of this.
All sorts of neat things happen. One, the students can actually master the concepts, but they're also building their growth mindset, they're building their grit, their perseverance, they're taking agency over their learning. And all sorts of beautiful things can start to happen in the actual classroom. Instead of it being focused on the lecture, students can interact with each other. They can get deeper mastery over the material. They can go into simulation, Socratic dialogue. If you were allowed to be operating in a mastery framework, if you were allowed to really take agency over your learning, and when you get something wrong, embrace it, view that failure as a moment of learning, that number of the percent that could really master calculus or understand organic chemistry is actually a lot closer to 100%.
Well, that's it. At least as much as I can cover in 10 minutes. So I hope you were able to learn something about mastery learning and its benefits, possible difficulties, and whether or not it's a good instructional model to use in your classrooms. I only have one more thing to say.